judge based on the physical properties, which also judge based on the chemical properties of water, and then as well as the biological component. Now, for the physical properties of water, safe drinking water should be that in appearance, it should have no color, it should be clear, right? Then for odor, definitely must be odorless. And then there's what we call turbidity. That's the amount of particles in the water. It shouldn't have particles, drinking water. And then also the taste, it should be tasteless as well. Okay. Now for the chemical components, obviously a safe drinking water shouldn't contain any chemical contaminations. And then for the bacteriological aspects, the biological aspect of it means the microorganisms inside the water. For water to be safe, potable for drinking, it also shouldn't contain especially pathogenic organisms like the viruses or the protozoa. Basically, it shouldn't. So these are the characteristics of a potable water. And that's what we should look out for when we're talking about safe drinking water.
All right, so help us understand how, if we have all of this, but then the quality of water, accessibility to water in itself is a major issue we need to get into. But what would result to water not meeting all of these standards you've talked about? That's referring to what could make a water quality to be poor and not make it potable.
All right, so before we get into that, we look at the sources of water that we have, right? So generally there's the rainwater, which is one of the commonest, especially here in Nigeria. And then we have the surface water and then the underground water. So based on these sources of water, there are different challenges associated to each of them. Yes. So talking about rainwater, areas with a lot of pollutions, we're looking at Port Harcourt, for instance. These areas, when rain falls, you collect water, and then most likely a lot of impurities in the air will settle in during rainfall, obviously, will settle inside the water during the rainfall. And also the storage, the way these waters are stored in the houses could also lead to contamination. According to the UNICEF you quoted as well, 70% of water we drink gets contaminated at the point where people drink it. At about 70% of this water gets contaminated. So for also the underground water, the challenges with it is that first, getting it out is challenging enough, and we'll have to deal with the government aspect of what bringing water for people. Then also, in Nigerian society, unfortunately, we still suffer when it comes to open defecation, as well as sewage, refuse dump, and all that. This will affect both the underground source of water as well as the surface sources like the streams and rivers and all that. And then when it even comes to surface water, it has its own challenges because some of them are not fit for drinking. It has to go through certain chemical processes, which can also be challenging. So when you take it as a whole, each source of water has its own peculiarities as well as challenges. Yes. But then here in Nigeria, I think most of the issue we have would be if the government has make efforts to providing good and safe drinking water for people. I think it will go a long way in mitigating the challenges we face in Nigeria. And like we said, Nigeria as a society has one of the highest rates of infants and children dying due to water-related diseases.
Okay, just a moment now. If you're listening, you can be part of this water conversation this morning by calling us up on the phone line. 0809-444-0981 will be the number to get just WhatsApp messages only. Looking at the topic today, it's a National Water Month set aside, to look at the importance of water in human existence. I've got Dr. Nnadozie Abugu, all the way from Abuja, speaking to us about the significance of water in our existence. So let's wait for the messages to come, but let's get on to, you were on the course of, you diverted to get us to know the sources of water. You talked about rain and other sources, the underground water and all of those now. Now you were going to speak to sources, what makes water quality to be very poor, and you mentioned how it is stored. I want you to expatiate on that.
Okay, so let's look at the common ways Nigerians store water. Some store in these overhead tanks, the GP tanks. Some store in these metallic tanks. Some store in wells. Others also store their waters in, in the villages. They have in the rural areas, there are clay pots where people store water. Also, some store in jerry cans, some in butas in their houses. Okay, so the challenges with these. So talking about the GP tanks, for instance, there was a time I was in a particular location, and then they were cleaning up their GP tank, and we see the sediments. Sediment is too dirty, and people have been drinking this water. And then you ask yourself why someone is always coming to hospital, coming down with typhoid, coming down with, and when sometimes you have cholera outbreaks. Or even look at IDP camps, for instance. I was just reading up someone here in the one we have here in Abuja, and the challenges they also have with regards to water. So the issue is in the storage, in where these waters are stored, they're not properly, waters are not properly generally stored in Nigeria. Then also let's say the ones stored in tanks suffer the same fate like the GP tanks. The people, they are not properly cleaned. Also, contaminations come into play. People stock water in gallons, and then maybe they want to scoop water from the cup all the way into their systems, or even the water they used to cook. So if you ask me, I think addressing water contamination would be a national discourse, not just something an individual has to do. The government has to play a role, then come to individuals as well.
Nnadozie, you mentioned, you touched on drinking water from clay pot. I generally when somebody listening right now, it's been a traditional form before the advent of the refrigerator and all of those. That seemed to be if you wanted cool water, that's where you go to. They keep it somewhere, a special part of the house where it's there, so you can get. So I hope you're not saying it is bad to get to drink water out of the clay pot.
Let me expatiate on that, actually. I did. When I was growing up, when I visited, anytime I visited my grandma, we fetch water from the clay pot. She stores it in a very cool area. It's really, the water comes out very fresh. The challenge with it is that, so I noticed after she had collected the rainwater, she put some alum inside the water to help it sediment. Then the water appears clear. Now, the challenge is that even though alum would help coagulate big particles, there are still some minute particles that we cannot see with our naked eyes. There are still microorganisms inside the water we can't see with our naked eyes. Do you understand? And even some chemical components that we can't see with our naked eyes. And this is where the challenge comes in. The water may appear fine because, human eyes can't, we don't have a magnifying glasses. But eventually, if you pass the same water under a microscope, you will see the challenges here, these microorganisms. And that's why water needs to be treated before you can consider it safe for drinking.
Okay, Nnadozie, we'll go on a quick break. When we come back, you'd help us expatiate more on the question, the nagging question, if water has what you call expiration date, especially when we look at packaged water and all of those. Stay with us. It is still Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1 FM. It's for 15. So I wanted to go on the break for 10 to take that one, but since I couldn't get it, that's what I was trying to get at. What this?
Okay, for 15 minutes, right?
We'll be back shortly.
Okay.
So let's go. We're back. It is still Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1 FM. Dr. Nnadozie is still here all the way from Abuja, helping us get into the conversation. Nnadozie, we're back.
All right.
So let's look at, we know you mentioned sources of water already, and you've expatiated that there is need for preservation, and the means of storage can also lead to contamination of water, and that doesn't make it safe for drinking. And that led me to the question of expiration of water. Take us through that, especially packaged water we see all over the place.
Okay, so basically, depending on the type of water, there are different expiration dates. I may not have the exact date, but I'll just give a general overview. For instance, carbonated water, bottled water wouldn't, especially in plastics, shouldn't stay with one for at least, I think, about a week, 2 weeks. Then tap water may be properly stored, can be kept for up to 6 months. Then also sachet water, the ones we commonly drink, should at least, for me, I think about 3 days. I think the standard 3 days for that kind of water. And then apart from just how long it should be, the way you store is also very important. You know, water in plastics, nylon, like the sachet water we drink, or gallons, should be kept away from sunlight. And that is why sometimes when I look at some of these plastic bottles, you go to places where they are selling these water bottles, let's say supermarkets or outdoor kiosks, they pack them outside to the effect of direct sunlight. And these are also not good. The danger here is that we have the nanoparticles getting into the water and increasing the contaminants in the water. Yes. So I think these are challenges when it comes to storing water.
So it's established there is an expiration date for water. And what does the sun, if you expect, you mentioned water stored in all of this can and packaged water exposed to sun, what does it do?
So when I was talking about exposing water to direct sunlight,
yes,
obviously sunlight will always excite chemical particles within any objects, whether water or solid, that it hits. So I want to imagine having a water in plastics and then keeping them under direct sunlight. The plastic gets heated. There's what we call nanoparticles. I was reading an article one time on the effect of nanoparticles and how they are also carcinogenic. So these nanoparticles likely get into the water and increase the chemical components of water when it hits direct sunlight. Apart from that, also the chemicals used in treatment of water, maybe by the companies who use this water who package water on commercial purposes. Also, these chemicals will get excited when it's hit by direct sunlight, and it's the effect, the cascade effect goes on and on and on. So definitely, it wouldn't be advisable for someone to keep water, especially drinking water, under the effect of a direct sunlight. So always advisable to keep it in a cool place, cool area, away from direct sunlight.
Okay, since we've established this, let's get into, because we talked about how many children we get to lose every year, over 117,000 children lost annually as a result of water-related diseases. Now, yes, walk us through all of this issue of, consumption of unhygienic water and diseases that can come, as a result of all of this.
All right. I think now you're coming to my area more as a medical doctor.
We have to set the foundation, yes.
Likely freestyling, since they are not my domain. But yes, now coming to this now you're talking about waterborne diseases. And unfortunately, like we mentioned earlier, Nigeria has the highest rate of infant-related deaths due to waterborne diseases. Now, the children are most vulnerable, same as, actually, there are 3 groups of people usually considered vulnerable to waterborne diseases: the children, the elderly, and the immunocompromised people, because they have weak immune system to fight against this infection. Children in particular obviously would depend on an adult for drinking water, basically. And also, even if the adults are not present, a child cannot necessarily tell a quality water from the abnormal one. So they are usually at risk. Now, what are the common, the top diseases we encounter here in Nigeria when it comes to waterborne disease include the cholera, then the infective hepatitis, typhoid, which quite common in our environment. Then even guinea worm as well. I mean, some people, you see pictures of worm protruding from people's leg. That also very common here in our environment. Then dysentery as well. And then from time to time, we hear about cholera outbreak, especially in the north, because of the kind of weather they have there. So a lot of, there's not really rainfall compared to the southern part of Nigeria. And then see, the source of water here is limited, basically to the underground source of water. And then, like I said, also the underground has its own challenges, extracting and then distribution challenges. Therefore, the water can get easily contaminated. And then you now have, and something, these waterborne diseases like cholera, we call them fecal oral transmission. So they get contaminated by sewage of fecal matter. Then,
when you say fecal matter, what does break it down? So for someone
physics,
who's not,
I'm talking about physics.
yes.
So that's why when we talk about open defecation is a challenge. A case in point, some of these IDP camps, we usually have cholera outbreak from time to time because first they practice the open defecation, and then also, even in rural areas, there are open defecation, and then major source of water can be streams or other spring underground sources. What happens? These fecal matters during rainfall can be washed because they're not properly disposed, can wash into these water bodies. Microorganisms multiply, and then when people take in this water, so when we take it, so contamination of water, fecal matter makes it, and then drinking water contaminated by this fecal matter is where that word fecal oral transmission is derived from. So commonly, most of these waterborne diseases are fecal oral. When I say fecal oral, that's contaminated feces
Getting into water.
Yes, getting water, then the water being taken in by unsuspecting people. So, and then, like I said, children are more vulnerable because they can't tell, obviously can't tell, and then they depend on adults, and also adults. So I was in a case also in this IDP camp. When we have limited water supply, you make do with what you have, and then so at the end of the day, once they look at water, oh, it's clear. And then the thing about water, it can be a bit deceptive. You can look at the water, it looks clear. When we talk about the physical property, it might look clear, it might look odorless, might look tasteless, but then the biological component of it that you would require to see maybe through microscopy or running some tests may not be, the average citizen cannot do this. So that is why some of them, they are very much at risk. The water might appear physically fine, but there are microorganisms in the water. And then when these children consume it, they can come down there. And the children, their immune system, just like the immunocompromised people too, is actually weak. And they are prone to also having diarrhea and then dehydration and all the sequel down to even dying from such complications.
I would like to come back to those some of the waterborne diseases you talked about earlier on. You talked about dysentery, you talked about typhoid. I'd like you to speak to some of the symptoms you could see, because there's an opportunity also to get people to begin to watch out for signs so they can be sought help as quickly as possible.
Right. Generally, the common symptoms would be diarrhea. That's the commonest symptoms that people can get from waterborne disease. Then followed by, you have the abdominal pain, then or discomfort, then vomiting. So gastroenteritis, vomiting and stooling. Commonly when there's cholera outbreak, we come down with vomiting, stooling, and the stool in particular has, I'm talking about cholera now.
Yes.
We call it, in the medical lingo, we call it rice water stool. The water after washing rice, that color, that white, so that's the color of patients with down with cholera. So they come down with diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain, abdominal discomfort, weight loss. Obviously, as you're losing water, you're losing body mass entirely. then come down with fatigue, come down with anorexia. Medical term will refer to a lack of appetite. So these are the common symptoms. Fever might be there. Fever might be there. Also vomiting. For typhoid, we also have diarrhea alternating with constipation. That's not able to pass through. That typhoid that alternates. Also, typhoid can come with fever. Sometimes typhoid might have come down abdominal rash. But generally, when waterborne disease too has a link with sanitation. If we have lack of access to water or reduced access to water, obviously, directly proportionally, the sanitary level is expected to be low. And if it is low, then people just get contaminated easily, especially vegetables and fruits.
Yeah.
So these are another ways these things can get into the system. So these are the symptoms, generally the symptoms to look out for. Once why I had to point it out is that you might be thinking, maybe it's because of what I ate or the fruit. Yes, they're actually linked. When you trace it eventually, you can see that the source of that infection might be the water you're using to wash your fruit. The fruit might be okay, but the water you're using to wash the fruit might be where the problem is. And also, just remind, I remember something. I was watching a video once online of a packet of sachet of pure water.
Yes.
And there was a worm inside the water. This is something given to people to drink.
All right. Nnadozie, please, I'd like you to hold your thoughts. We need to go on a quick break, and when we come back, you expand on that point. It's still Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1 FM. What are we doing next? I was waiting for 8:30 now.
What does future-forward banking mean to you? Speed, innovation, convenience, lifestyle goals, or just simply getting service that is designed just for you? Yeah, we thought you might like all of that and more. That is why we specially created Providence Bank for you to take care of your daily experiences at Providence Bank. We believe that banking should be all about you and your business and how to get you to the next level. If you do not already have a Providence Bank account, please speak with our business concierge on 0700 77 or business concierge at providencebank.com to switch to a future forward banking experience. Providence Bank. Future forward banking.
How many did we miss? It's just one, that one on top. It all started with when we missed this thing here. That was what happened. So it's not my fault. So what do we do now? When are we coming back? Go to. I'm on hotkeys already. Or music. That fella music.
Convenience, lifestyle goals, or just simply getting service that
was finished now.
We thought you might like all of that and more. That is why using Providence Bank for you to take care of your daily experiences. At Providence Bank, we believe that banking should be all about you and your business and how to get you to the next level.
Nnadozie, if you can hear me, just say something.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. So you were dwelling on the point of identifying cholera and all of those points. But before you go to the point, someone has been listening to you already, and the questions here for you already. And it says, that's Gilbert Musa from Festac. It said, it commends you for the simple definition you've given so far in terms of good water habits. So that's a compliment for you from one of our listeners. But he says, his question is, individual boreholes for houses compared to general central water board in the community, which is safe for the environment? How can one connect to you after this program? So this will be for you.
Okay, individual boreholes and what the one run by the government, right?
Yes, central.
Which one is safer for the environment?
Yes.
At the end of the day, generally, once run by the government will be better in an ideal system. I'm talking about an ideal system here. Government there are basic things government provide to their citizens. Safe drinking water is one of them. Electricity and the internet and the rest, but safe drinking water is actually one of them. At least, even if not safe drinking water, collecting waters in the houses should be a basic amenity provided by the government. The challenge, I think, is that going for individual, not everyone can afford that. That's one, and then cost of maintenance too. But safer for the environment, I would actually go with the government because it will be more centralized. And then if every individual should actually go ahead to dig boreholes and then provide for themselves, what happens in a situation where, because I was reading an article, I think there was an article recently, sometime last year, they talked about government trying to control the water sources or stuff like that. And the government were talking about, because water is not evenly distributed to everyone, so they have to control, and I kind of keyed into that. Because if every individual should source water for themselves and all, what happens when water starts running out? Or, I mean, not just water, but drinking water. So what actually happens? So the ideal situation in an ideal country, even for sustainability purposes, I think government should take control of supplying water to individuals in houses. Where I trained, for instance, I trained in Ukraine, all houses are connected. The government supplies the water. We pay a monthly water bill, although some people some drink the water, but some don't. I didn't drink the water while I was there. I go to certain locations to buy water or even refill water. That is something that we should look into here in Nigeria. I think private individuals can, in Ukraine, for instance, we have these machines strategically located around apartments, residential areas. So tanks from the companies come to refill the machine. Then you go with your gallon. There are certain kind of gallons. You just go there, you put in your money, and then you buy. The machine refills your gallon for you. And then you take it to your. Some people don't drink the general water supply because maybe it's high in fluorine or chloride, whichever the chemical they use in treating it. So yes, I would think in an ideal society and for sustainability and for which one is better for the environment, government should come into play. Just that here in Nigeria, we don't really talk about that. We know how things work out here. And then the citizens have to fend for themselves, even to provide good drinking water.
All right.
I want to just chip in. For instance, what's going on in Enugu, for instance, they've not had good drinking water for a long time now, although the new government said they are doing something about that. So I'm just trying to point out that the government have challenges, and if they can sort it out, for environment and for sustainability, is always best for government to take charge of these things.
All right, I'll come back to you. The questions are piling already. I see your question, Wilson, but I'd like you to clear up this aspect of the relationship between water and the resurgence of typhoid fever, especially amongst people who would keep treating and treating and treating. And so why is it difficult to get to treat typhoid? Okay,
that's a very good question. The treating typhoid, the challenge we have in Nigeria is one. I will come to water, but the challenges to fight typhoid in Nigeria is first, because of the way it presents, usually person may not come, patient may not come with fever immediately. Maybe you just have headache, then constipation today, diarrhea tomorrow is alternate. And what Nigerians do first? They first of all seek out herbal medication, herbal concussion. Then if that doesn't work, what is I go them? If those things don't work, next thing they go to a chemist. Oh, and then we self-medicate a lot in Nigeria. Oh, they go to, I'm having headache. That's the complaint. Or I'm having a diarrhea. You know, the chemist will give them Panadol or give the person something for the diarrhea. And you know, they're just treating the symptom. They're not attacking the problem, the microorganism causing this problem. And this is the challenge we see them. When they come to hospital, they come down with complications. That's one case. Now, the other case is that Salmonella is also overdiagnosed in Nigeria because of the kind of the test, the Salmonella bacteria is also overdiagnosed because the wider test we also use to run for this gives a lot of false positive results. So people go and run a wider test and then they tell you, oh, you have typhoid malaria. You know, always commonly you have typhoid malaria. Typhoid is actually not that common. I don't know the statistics, but even malaria on its own can give a false result, positive result for the wider test that will run for typhoid. But classically also, typhoid can be a very latent infection when it's not properly treated. It can be in the system. You know, when we say latency, it treats and then it goes to hide. Sometimes in the liver, it's just hides. Sorry, in the gallbladder, it hides there, and then when bile is released, it keeps recirculating in the system. So that is why when you have typhoid, or when you're diagnosed with typhoid in the hospital, make sure you run a proper test. Yeah. Maybe a culture, and then they give you doctor prescribed antibiotics. Please stick to the antibiotics that's given to you. And now coming to
link water in it.
Now coming to the water side of it, what contaminates open defecation is one of the contaminants, common contaminants, because and then improper sewage disposal. Take for instance, people dump things inside the circle. The government is trying also, but the individuals also, we also have to do on our own part. We have to play our roles. You can't dump excreta anywhere. You know, you just you defecate anyhow. You dump refuse sewage anyhow. You know, at the end of the day, these things find their way into our foodstuff, especially the fresh vegetables or fruits that we consume. One thing I also want to point out, people have to be careful. These people that sell fruits, especially sugarcane, one of the reasons I stopped eating sugarcane is that I noticed it was sort of I had series of typhoid initially. So you have to actually watch carefully. When you start having issues, okay, you've been treated typhoid and it's not going, you have to sit down and ask yourself, where am I likely getting this from? Mine was likely I love sugarcane a lot. Also, I love the tiger nut, the one they carry in the barrel. So the issue is that, you know, sugarcane and tiger nuts, they pour water on it to make it swell up and then feel fresh every time. Also, tiger nut, the same thing, they hibernate, they put it somewhere, fill in water, and then allow it to stay there for some time before they bring it up to sell. So if you're someone that likes sugarcane, I would advise to stop buying from these people that carry it in the barrel, garden egg and the rest. Rather get it from the farmer, directly from the farmer. So now when I want to eat sugarcane, I buy the full stock, then come to my house and cut it and prepare it. If I want to eat tiger nut, I buy the hard ones. I'll come in and soak it myself. Make sure, because when these things involve water, so you have to be very careful. You have to watch out for your health as well. So tiger nuts, sugarcane, garden egg, these things you definitely have to prepare yourself. Then when I go to restaurant, I don't eat anything that is not cooked outside. Let's say salad, mixed vegetable, mixed fruit, all those. I don't eat them outside because you don't know how it was prepared. You don't know the source of water, how they prepare these things. So better to be safe than sorry. Prepare these things. Anything that has to do with eating fresh, prepare at home.
Okay. Let's see, then the messages are pouring in for you, Dr. Nnadozie. And this one here says, good morning, Smooth FM. Also, I greet the guest. I have a question. The question is that the sachet water, popularly called pure water, has expiry date of maximum 3 days, but they are always produced en masse. stored at the factory or at the shop of the retailers for weeks before they will finish selling the large quantity they bought before going for another purchase. And people always buy and drink this water that has exceeded the 3 days in storage mark. I would say, notes to myself also guilty. So what do we do? How do we manage such a situation is what this person is saying. Because before it gets to the shop, it's past 3 days already. So what do you do?
Okay, let me even, before I get to that, let me even say something like gala. There was a time as people were talking about gala, it was trending about some, they clean up the expiry date or they cover up the expiry date, or there's something these people do, these manufacturers, because they are mandated, I think by NAFDAC to put in the expiry date. Then what they do, they put it on other letterings. There's such a way that it's difficult to actually read what has been written there, the expiry date.
Yes.
Okay, so they make it, it's there, but you can't necessarily tell which date it is exactly.
We'll come back and then you expatiate on that shortly. We just go on this quick break. It's still Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1 FM. Stay with us. Is it this advert, right? There's another one for 55, right?
That's why you need a partner like Leadway, one experienced enough to help you build while still having.
Oh, sorry, it's not product name. Oh, Gala. Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. I won't mention Gala again. Don't say Gala.
Okay.
Okay. What other do we have here? Go to message for me. So we have roughly 3 or 4 minutes to go. So
now that I'm beginning to enjoy the program, we just have 3 minutes. That's sad. We should have just started with the health aspect of the program from the onset.
And we're back for the final stretch of the show. It's Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1. Dr. Nnadozie, all the way from Abuja, has been our guest today, looking at the impact of quality water in celebration of the National Quality Water Celebration for the month of August, just as a way to highlight the importance of paying attention to water hygiene is what we've been discussing so far, and it's been so far interactive with lots of questions coming in. Nnadozie, you were going to make a point before we went on that break, so you just conclude the thoughts as quickly as possible, but then no mention of, there's no product like the sausage you mentioned earlier, and just stay away from that. We understand what it means. Don't even mention the name before you get an invoice.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. So just finish up on that, then let's go on.
For the person that asked about how this can be regulated, I think there are regulatory agencies. I mean, NAFDAC is there. It's just to enforce the rules, make sure that these people stick to the already set down guidelines. It's just enforcement. I think what's left is enforcement. Then on your part as an individual, just make sure you trust your source of maybe the person you buy from. Some of them are very honest. They will tell you this how long this water has been there. And also, most times, if you can afford it, just go for quality brands that you can trust. But at the end of the day, if government can make its potable water accessible to everyone, then it's a win for all of us.
No, even now, let's not even make it look like it's the sachet water thing, because by the time you want to even, it's this bottled water thing looks like a status thing, but more, even before you get the bottled water to your house, some of them, they pass the expiration date. So it's not about sachet water alone now.
Yeah, that's actually true. That's actually true. So at the end of the day, it's left for the government to the regulatory bodies to do their work, make sure these people are meeting up to the set down guidelines. I mean, there are rules already for these things. It's just I think implementation is the challenge we have in Nigeria most times. Is implementation.
Well, Austin has a question for you. He's been following the show, so he's got a question for you, and he says, "Good morning. There are some residential buildings that dug their boreholes very close to what you call the sockaway pit, or sockaway, as he said here. Is there the possibility that the water in the sockaway and that of the borehole mixing together some way?" He likes, because you're here, to clear that.
100%. I mean, there's always a possibility. I mean, this underground water somehow, even I can't remember the exact time, is it by osmosis or some way, they get to mix, they interact. Maybe not the fecal matter itself, but the microorganisms get washed in. There's always a 100% possibility they get mixed up. And this is the challenge, like we said, with regards to borehole and all. For individuals with a place that have source of water in this kind of setup, I would really advise to do your own personal, if you must drink from that well, then your own personal purification. There are certain setups that might not be so expensive. One of the also surest ways, you have to boil your water. You can boil, get your, what's it called? Just get something, boil the water, certain over 100 degrees or certain temperature, and then allow it to cool and then drink. In this way, at least you have killed off most of the pathogenic microorganisms. But the chemical aspect of it too will also require certain treatments as well. So if you're interested in, which everybody should, if you must drink water from such sources that can be easily contaminated, then you have to be careful. You have to be careful and take necessary precautions to treat your water. That's the least you could do, I mean, for your health.
Now, because you touched on that aspect, chemicals, let's look at, aside from boiling, which is more like the easiest thing to do, what about, now you talked about chemicals. Is it advisable to now get to treat your own water at home if you're not boiling, but to get some chemicals and add to water before you drink?
The challenge with this is that you also wouldn't want to add more than required dosage of the chemical. Usually, there are some of them out there you can buy from the market. Things like chloride we use to treat water. Then also they add iodine also.
Well, let's just so nobody goes and begin to do some home practice.
Oh, sorry.
So it goes again, but then it goes again to say, how safe is the source in itself? Because how do we tell? Because you have mentioned the underground water meeting. There's no guarantee that we don't even know which water is really safe, even from the central point. Actually, this also comes down to public policy. There are actually some recommendations on how far apart what maybe such wells should be from the sockaway pits. There are actually standards. There are guidelines on how this is done. But the issue is that sometimes people build indiscriminately. They don't follow the required guidelines. So I don't know. It also comes down to government policies as well. And does it look at it? See it from this angle. Yes, I am. My building, my water borehole is somewhere at the back of my house. The sockaway, let's say, is at the front, right? Now, my neighbor's borehole is at my backyard, meaning on the other side of the fence. So you see, there's really a very, very inconsistent matter in all of this method.
That's what we're saying, that the planning, it comes down to planning and execution. There are guidelines on how far away a sockaway pit should be from a source of drinking water, like well water, for instance. There are guidelines, like borehole, there are guidelines, but people don't follow it, maybe because of the availability of land space, or maybe other things, but still, there are laws guiding these things. So at the end of the day, if you put them together, there will be contamination, definitely, they will contaminate. So it lies on you as an individual. Now, what can you do? You have to take other, since water, your source of water, as well as the sewage or the soakaway are close to each other, you have to then take necessary precautions. Try to filter your water. Sometimes this tap have a sort of filters you can get and fix in your tap. Although the problem is that not everything gets filtered. You can filter the particles, but some microorganisms like the viruses that are really tiny can escape and still cause problems. So if you filter, you still boil, and then maybe do some other, just do a little research and have a setup. But it's not, in the long run, it's not sustainable.
Well, safely said, earlier on you mentioned the central water source of supply by the government would be the safest point, really, from what you have mentioned earlier on. So, and we'd have to close on that note. Well, I've been speaking with Dr. Nnadozie Abugu all the way from Abuja. He's the founder of the ACE Medics Academy. Thank you so much for allowing us consult you and take much of your time today. We thank you because you're not sending us a bill after this time out. But for those who also sent in messages, Austin, Wilson, Gilbert, I see your messages and I see some persons still typing, but I'm sorry, your messages won't get in because we are done with the show for this morning. And that's the size of Lagos Talks this morning on Smooth 98.1. It's been a special focus on the August as National Water Quality Month. So remember, everything you do, pay attention to the water you drink because your health will just be lying at stake with everything you drink. So stay tuned to Smooth 98.1 FM all day, every day, because after now, it's going to be some smooth collection of strictly soul music. And then the drive